of up to $1,000. Roster brought to you by Rhythm. Start crushing college football and the NFL with Rhythm. Get your 7-day free trial today by going to sportsgamblingpodcast.com/rhythm. That's sportsgamblingpodcast.com/RITHMM. And taking a shot to ground downfield. He makes the catch, and he gets in for the touchdown.
The catch is made by Calvin Ridley. Wilson, what as he throws deep downfield. It's going to be caught by Ridley.
Welcome, everyone, to the Propcast, part of the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. Here to get into NFL Week 6 on Thursday night football, and a pretty great matchup to start the Week 6 here, NFC West battle between the San Francisco 49ers and the Seattle Seahawks. Both teams coming off of upset losses in Week 5. The 49ers dropped their game against the Cardinals, and then the Giants went into Seattle and upset the Seahawks here. So big game here between these two teams early in the season, obviously with division implications here, of course, as well. We'll get into all that on this episode. Of course, our player props, our touchdown scores, and we'll, of course, wrap it up with our best bets for Thursday night football. But joining me here to help me break everything down happening for this matchup on Thursday night football, got my guy here with me. It's ChrisBeCappinn. Chris, what's going on, brother? How you doing?
What's up, excited to be here as always, man. Week 6 feels like we just got started. Feel like last week we were doing divisional previews, giving out some of those, season-long player props. And, here we are 6 weeks into it, man. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. Excited to jump into this divisional matchup, especially with, like you said, both teams coming off losses, not just regular losses of, where they were favored by a touchdown, or I think 7.5 was one of the numbers as well. So excited to see what happens in the bounce back spot here, for both teams on a short week.
Yeah, 100%. And again, the Niners had a good lead in that, or I should say, I want to say it was a double-digit lead.
It was a double-digit lead, yeah.
Right?
It was 10 or 13.
Yeah, against the Cardinals at home, and they didn't score a single point in that second half. And a lot of that had to do with the injury to their kicker there as well. Jake Moody was going to be out for some time for the San Francisco 49ers, and for the Seattle Seahawks. It was just the Giants just showed up and they played ball, and they had a really good outing. I mean, when we talk about this New York Giants team going into that game in Week 5 against Seattle, we knew they were going to be without Malik Neighbors, a couple other pieces there as well, and we thought that it would be an opportunity for the Seattle Seahawks to gain a game in this division, because what the Niners are capable of doing. But unfortunately for them, and if you are a Seahawks fan, that they dropped that game against the Giants. But you got to give the Giants again a lot of credit for going in there and stealing that victory. What I think at one point, Chris, was one of the more tougher environments. When we talk about the 12th man, maybe that's fizzled a little bit. I haven't really watched a lot of Seahawks games. I know it was when they had the Legion of Boom and Russell Wilson kind of in their prime and quote unquote dominating the NFC there. I feel like there's a little bit of that home field advantage is maybe not as much. I mean, I could be completely wrong, but I think also the travel spot as well, from having to travel from, if you are a team like the Giants that have come from the East Coast and travel all the way up to the Northwest, I think that can also be a tall order there as well. If you have any thoughts from last week, and I'm going to pull up the injury report here, Chris, before we dive into it. But if you have any thoughts from these two particular games for the Niners last week and then the Seahawks last week.
Yeah, I'll just start with we as Commander fans were rooting for Seattle last week, not wanting the Giants to get a win. Man, who wants to see the Giants win a football game? But you mentioned them, they take that trip, and I don't know if it was more of a bet on game for them. I know they ran the football really, really well, which always helps Daniel Jones out. With his we'll call it what will we call it? We'll call Daniel Jones a mistake. He's a mistake driven quarterback. We'll say that he makes a few mistakes up there. Turnover prone is what I was looking for. There we go. So we'll say he got a few breaks there with them being able to run the ball so well last week. But Seattle was in a weird spot as well. They have had to travel for every single game, and it's been East Coast, back to the West Coast, East Coast, back to the West Coast. So coming off that, they won a short week against, against the Detroit Lions on Monday Night Football the week before. So, having to get all the way from Detroit all the way back to, the top of the, West Coast can make for, a little bit of a flat spot, I think. And, not having Malik Neighbors, they probably thought, we don't even know some of these guys on offense for the Giants without Malik Neighbors. And, you just caught them sleeping. And then, for San Francisco, if it's been back-to-back, well, not back-to-back, well, yeah, back-to-back weeks, they're reminiscing a little bit of how Baltimore started the season off when I was thinking about this game and thinking about them specifically. Just a team that's getting out to these big leads and then, not necessarily following through. They don't always, come out with the win. And if they do, sometimes their offense kind of lets their foot up off the gas and defense not performing as well. So what I'm interested to see is how well they can convert on third down and how well they convert in the red zone, because you mentioned them being shut out in the second half. They lost the second half of 11-0. It was, I think, 3 points scored in the third quarter by the Arizona Cardinals, and then 11 points scored in that fourth quarter as well. And I want to say they have 3 or 4 opportunities, to score, and you score, you probably win the game. So, and that's the Arizona defense is not that great. So, short week, back-to-back, leads that they've had that have been double digits. So I think they, take this one pretty seriously. They have both teams probably going to take this one pretty serious, but San Francisco specifically, they've dominated the head-to-head matchup in this divisional matchup over the last 4 or 5 games. So I'm interested to see. I think we get a really good punch from them early, and San Francisco, I think they win and get back on track here. But we'll see how it goes, and we'll talk player props instead.
Yeah. Before we get into the player props here, let me tell everybody about the devastation that was caused by Hurricane Helene over on the western North Carolina area. And SGPN, we're teaming up with a local charity called mountainprojects.org to help give back. The biggest donation, they'll get a guest spot on the College Football Picks show and a ton of great gear from our merch store. And, you can help contribute, whether it's a big amount, small amount, every little bit helps. It doesn't matter. And if you do want to contribute, just go to mountainprojects.org, hit that flood support button to help out today. We would greatly appreciate it if you could, donate anything that you can to help the people of Western North Carolina. And I want to take an opportunity here in a moment here to thank all of our listeners on the Propcast. I know this show has grown from year over year, and we wouldn't be here without the support that we've gotten from our fans here on the Propcast and our listeners as well. We put all our content out for free. There's a lot of other companies that do, paywalls and pay for picks and things like that. And the only thing that we ever ask is giving us a rating and review, whether it's on Spotify, whether it's on Apple. And if you could do us that courtesy, just take a moment, give us a 5-star review, leave a nice comment, possibly if you could as well. Only you can prevent corporate gambling from taking over. All right, Chris, let's get into our player props here, man, for Thursday Night Football, Niners, Seahawks. To start here with our quarterback props, and then we'll work our way from there, man. What do you got for quarterback prop?
So quarterback was actually the most difficult one for me, so I'm interested to see what you got to say. But
all right.
These numbers feel appropriate. I'll say this: the thing that really jumped out to me the most, first thing I did when I looked into this was I wanted to see yards, because I know Geno has been slinging it, left and right. This Seattle offense is predicated, specifically, at least at the beginning of the season. I think more so recently as well, even with Kenneth Walker being back in that backfield, they're predicated on passing the ball. If I'm looking at the numbers, number 1 in passing attempts per game, just a tad bit under 40. So immediately I jump to, maybe we go Geno Smith over on his pass attempts here. They're also passing the ball at a very, they're passing the ball really well. Passing percentage, completion percentage, 72%, 4th best in the NFL for 271 yards per game. So, that's 3rd in the NFL, just to put some numbers behind that as well. So the top, this is one of the top passing offenses in the NFL, So I think, where I kind of landed here was, I think the completions, I think the completions make the most sense versus, necessarily the attempts. And Geno completions are pretty high, 24.5, but yeah, I just mentioned it. 72% of his passes are being, completed. So that's the 4th best in the in the NFL right now. And I do feel like Seattle is going to have to, score the ball and move the ball through the air here. If I looked at San Francisco's defense, and it's not anything to write home about quite, but they are still top 10 in yards allowed per game, just giving up 110 on the ground, which puts them at ninth. And I'm of the mindset that Kenneth Walker can have a big game, but if San Francisco can slow them down and they're locked in defensively, as like we think that they will be after blowing that double-digit lead against the Arizona Cardinals last week, I think we see a game where San Francisco's winning. So you have a Seattle team that's trailing, and Geno has to beat this team with his arm here. So 24.5 really kind of jumped off the page to me. If I'm going back and looking at his game logs, he threw the ball 40 times last week, 28 completions. So he went up and over the number. The week before, 38 times, 38 completions for 56 attempts against that, really good run stopping defense in Detroit. 26 in here against Miami on 34 attempts, 33 against New England, and 18 against the Denver Broncos in week number 1 as well, when, it was really just a fill-out process. So 25 to me, feels doable, especially with him going over and, 4 of the last 5 games, but haven't quite put my money on it yet. I wanted your thoughts. I do see that plus money over on ESPN Bet right now as well. You can get 5 cent, to the plus 5 cent over there. So that's the one that jumped out to me the most. I want your thoughts on that, and let me know what you're thinking about quarterbacks as well.
Yeah, I think for Geno, I do have a prop here for Geno. Actually, there's a couple things that I like for Geno here, but I think it kind of goes back to last week. Last week wasn't the case that according to game script and what the spread was that the Seahawks should have been out in front. But if I expect them to be trailing in this game at some point, whether that's by a possession or whether it's possibly by 2 possessions or 9 or more points, I think that is within the realm of possibility here against the 49ers. Which would pretty much just lead to the Seahawks having to throw the football. And also you take a look at how great the rushing defense has been thus far this season for this 49ers team. I think that they may, I'm not saying they're going to have to abandon it, but I think there may be a little bit maybe a 60-40 split when them passing the football a little bit more versus having to run the football here. So there's a couple of ways you can get to it, right? Again, it's either that they're trailing in this game and Geno's going to throw the football and rack up those completions, or the Niners having a lot of success shutting down the run with Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet. Right now, the Niners are allowing the 9th least rushing yards per game, which is around 111 yards per game. And then you also take a look at their opponent yards per rush attempt thus far this season here, Chris. They're a little bit below league average in that. They're down to at number 21 at 4.7. So, and I think a lot of that last week probably had to do with Kyler Murray having that big rush attempt that he did have for about 50 yards there. So, I think it's high and tied for a reason, right? So I think it's correlated that if he gets over the completions, I think he gets over his passing yards there as well at 250.5. So, I don't hate it, but I think that 24.5 just kind of makes me a little bit nervous, just because it is a big number for Geno. For my player or my quarterback prop here, I'll say one of them for honorable mentions. I'm going to go with Geno's rushing yards to go over the number of 12.5 here, Chris. And we take a look, at least over the last 2 weeks, that we're starting to see Geno use his legs a little bit more. That number is actually up to 14.5 now. So the market moved on this big time. But over the last 2 weeks, Geno Smith, he's been utilizing his legs against the Detroit Lions. On Monday Night Football a couple of weeks ago, 5 attempts for 38 yards. And then just last week against the Giants, he had a rush attempt that went for 32 yards. But overall, he was 4 of 72 on the ground last week against the Giants. And if we go back to week 1 as well, 4 rush attempts for 30 yards against the Denver Broncos. When we take a look at quarterbacks against the 49ers, I know they haven't had a lot of success running the football, but they really haven't faced quarterbacks that run, right? They had Aaron Rodgers in week 1 to the Niners. You had Sam Darnold in there, but Darnold had 5 attempts for 32 yards in that game. We know Matthew Stafford's not really a running quarterback. Jacoby Brissett, he can be, but he only had 2 attempts for 3 yards. And last week, like I mentioned, Kyler Murray was able to have 7 attempts, 83 yards, and that first touchdown, which was, I believe, 50 yards for Kyler Murray here. So, number one, you take a look at Geno Smith going up against his pass rush, whether, with Joey Bosa, Nick Bosa, one of the Bosa brothers, on that D line. I know they've been dealing with some injuries on that defensive line and at the linebacker position, but I think that if that pass rush is able to get to Geno Smith in this game, that he's going to have to utilize his legs and make plays with his legs. So 15.5, it's not a big number. He's done it in back-to-back weeks, so I think it's going to be important this week. And again, it will be Nick Bosa that will be breathing down his neck in this game here. So I'll take the over 15.5 rushing yards here for Geno Smith for my quarterback prop here, Chris.
Yeah, it makes a ton of sense. For whatever reason, what we've seen is that the Seattle's offensive line has lost the battle in these last 2 weeks. I think a big part of, the Giants going in there and winning the game was them winning the line of scrimmage, right? Their defensive line played, light years better than this offensive line. And if we continue to see that, especially on a short week, for, this Seattle front 5, front 6, front 7, that could spell some trouble here, So I'm in agreement with you here that Geno could, potentially take off and use his leg. We also got to just look at this. This Seattle offensive line was not projected to be well this season. They were graded out as the 29th, offensive line unit in general, and we've seen them struggle specifically with that. And I think that has been a reflection of them not being able to run the ball and just kind of putting it all on Geno. So I like the look on Geno to have to use his legs and get out and scramble for a few yards here and there, especially if they're playing from behind.
Yeah, 100%. All right, before we get over into our next round of player props here, let me tell everyone about our friends over at Underdog Fantasy. Underdog Pick'em has one of the biggest menus for all sports: NFL, college football, MLB, MMA, WNBA, NASCAR, and more. Their lobby is jam-packed with profit boosts, and you can now use specials on all flex entries. I'm going to be using that Geno Smith higher rushing yards for my entry for Thursday Night Football. And you can play along with us. So sign up with promo code MACHINE to claim your special pick and first-time deposit offer up to $1,000 in bonus cash. That's UnderdogFantasy.com. Make sure you got promo code MACHINE. All right, Chris, let's keep it rolling here. Take us over to player prop number 2, man. What do you got?
All right, so we'll go running back, and I feel pretty good about Mr. Jordan Mason this week. Over on his rushing yards is what I like a little bit more than the rush attempts. 80.5 is the number, is what, at least where I see it at. 18 cent of juice, so just a little bit more than the regular big. And this is really predicated on, the opposite side of what we just talked about. This is the Seattle's defense really giving it up against the run. Last week it was Tyrone Tracy Jr. who had 18 carries for 129 yards. Jahmyr Gibbs have also gashed this defense earlier this year, 78 yards on 14 carries. You had a really big, performance from Antonio Gibson for 11 carries for 96 yards as well against, when they were playing against the Patriots. Seattle's defense has given up an average, of 4.5 yards per pop on over 28 yards per game for an average of 128 yards per game. So that's, they're getting gashed here. Short week, not a lot of time to really repair that. I know that they'll try to, use, like you said, the 12th man and, those type of things. Probably game plan to try to stop the run and make Brock Purdy, a one-dimensional quarterback, but I don't think it's going to be that successful. The other thing that really stood out to me here, was, Jordan Mason lost his first fumble of his career last week in the first half of that game. And, right afterwards, you see Shanahan kind of decrease the volume. His snap share, dropped. It actually was the lowest that we've seen so far this season, because ball security is absolutely one of the most important thing, in football. And I'm of the mindset, that he bounces back here and that ball security is probably in the front of his mind, to avoid going in the team's doghouse. So I'll take Jordan Mason, just like I said, going back and looking at, what these running backs have been able to do and how they've been able to, find some success. I think Jordan Mason's in line for a really, really big week here against this Seattle front seven. So I'll take him up and over his rushing yards, over 80.5.
Yeah, I also have a player prop with Jordan Mason here, and that's going to be just to continue the conversation here for his longest rush attempt to be over 17.5 yards in this game here. And, for a lot of things that you mentioned, that the Seahawks rushing attack is well below league average. They've struggled in that area, right? Last week was a prime example of what you mentioned, and you mentioned the numbers there about what opposing running backs have been able to do against the Seahawks team. And I think that Jordan Mason has had a lot of success early in the season, filling in for CMC, who's been obviously injured for the entirety of the season here. So he's really embraced that opportunity. Yeah, he lost his first fumble, but I think that, like you mentioned, it's a good bounce back opportunity for Jordan Mason in this game. Just kind of looking at his numbers, he's averaging 5.1 yards per carry, 536 rushing yards on the season thus far. And kind of just look at his game log. I mean, last week he only had 14 carries, which equated to only, I don't want to say only, but 89 yards. But he's already had 3 games this season where he's had 100 or more rushing yards. But you also take a look at his longest rush attempts this season. In all 5 games, Chris, he's gone over this number of 17.5. 34 against the Cardinals, 25 against the Patriots, got it by the hook against the Rams, 22 against the Minnesota Vikings, that defense, and then he had longest rush attempt of 24 against the New York Jets back all the way in week 1 here. So I think it's a trend that can continue for him here. So again, hopefully he breaks one out for 30, 40, 50 yards, and we can I can cash my bet, and you can also, you can cash half of yours or get halfway there for Jordan Mason here. But I think this would be a big week for him against the Seattle Seahawks here on Thursday Night Football. So, expecting big things from Jordan Mason this week against the Seattle Seahawks. Anything else for Jordan Mason, Chris, before we move it along here?
No, I think that's perfect handicap him. Hopefully it's first snap of the game, 82-yard run, and we both cash and we turn it off and go to sleep.
There you go. All right, let's get over to player prop number 3 here, Chris. What do you got?
I'll go with his teammate, and I'll take George Kittle. Kittle really stood out to me here. I typically like to target, wide receivers a little bit more than I target tight ends, but George Kittle's spot stands out to me here. His receptions, I think, are definitely playable at 4.5, but I think I like the yards a little bit more at 47.5. So we'll go up and over 47.5. No juice on this one over on DraftKings. Kittle's coming off a very productive week versus Arizona last week. He had 12 targets, resulting in 8 catches for 64 yards. And the 47.5 is something that he's cleared in 2 of the 4 games, and he landed right about on the hook. I think he had 45 yards in that game against New England. That ended up being a blowout and didn't require much passing in the second half in that game anyway. And then, I just went back and looked at the previous tight ends that Seattle has played so far, and they've been putrid against the really good ones. The really good ones have had really impressive performances. Last week, there was a Theo Johnson from the Giants who had 5 receptions for 48 yards. 2 weeks ago, it was Sam Laporta who had 6 receptions for 66 yards, and Hunter Henry in week 2, 8 receptions on 12 targets for 109 yards and so forth, right? Like, this is not a good defense against the tight end position specifically. And then there's Kittle, track record against the Seattle defense. He's cleared the 47.5 in 3 of his last 4 games. 1 game last year, he had 5 for 19, but the other game he had 5 for 76. So, just going back a little bit farther, the last 6 times that they've faced he's faced off against the Seattle defense, he's up and over it 4 times. So I love that, hit rate. And it seems like Brock Purdy understands that he's a big target against this vulnerable, secondary and, DB group here, So I'll go George Kittle up and over his 47.5 yards, thinking that he can put it together back-to-back weeks and give me 50 yards receiving this week.
Yeah, I like this and everything that you mentioned about tight ends against the Seattle Seahawks, right? At least like you mentioned, like the the outstanding ones. The Patriots collectively, I mean, more so was Hunter Henry, who had 8 receptions, 109 yards in that game back all the way in week 2. The Miami Dolphins collectively had 46. We saw the Detroit Lions, and in particular Sam Laporta, 4 for 53. And then last week, Theo Johnson, 5 for 48. And I think that there's some type of chemistry that has developed with George Kittle and Brock Purdy ever since he's taken over as a quarterback for this team. 12 targets last week against Arizona for George Kittle. And he's a guy that, again, it's kind of underrated that what he's able to do once he does catch the football, because he can really get those yards after the catch. Can George Kittle for this offense, and he's gone up and over this number 2 out of the last 3 weeks. Fell a little bit short against the Patriots, and he's scored a touchdown in 3 straight. Or I should say, in the last 3 games that he's played. I know he missed, I believe it was week 3 with an injury there, but I do expect him to be out there. I know he's dealing with, I believe, a injury. I'm not sure if it was his ribs or what it was. Let me look it up exactly for George Kittle. But yeah, I've always been a George Kittle fan. I think that there's an opportunity for him to have a really big week here against the Seattle Seahawks. And just for that injury here, it is a ribs injury. So it was a limited participant in Tuesday's practice, but I think that as long as he's out there getting in that limited practice, I think he will be a go in this game here for sure. All right, for my last player prop here, or my third player prop, I should say, I'm going to go to the Seattle Seahawks side. I'm looking at Jackson Smith and Jigba to go under on his receiving yards in this game here. The number was at 48.5. It's dipped down to 47.5. But again, always when we talk about overs, unders, whatever the case might be, always you want to get the best number. But it seems like that he hasn't really been part of this offense for this Seahawks team, right? And I think there's 1 week that I did back him, which was against the Detroit Lions. And I mentioned that they had struggled against a slot wide receiver, and he had gotten up and over that number. And I know he had a good week against the New England Patriots, another team that do struggle against slot wide receivers. But his target share has really been up and down. He's had 2 weeks where he's had double-digit targets. But week 1, 2 receptions, 2 targets, 19 yards. Against the Dolphins, 3 for 3, 39 yards. Last week, he did get 7 targets, got 4 receptions, but only equated to 31 receiving yards for Jackson Smith and Jigba. And last season in 2 career games against the 49ers, he had a total accumulation of 6 receptions for 66 yards in those 2 division games last season. I'm sorry. And I don't think that he got over this number in either one of those games. He didn't. He had 4 receptions, 25 yards, and then 2 receptions for 41 yards here. And we know what DK Metcalf is capable of doing. We know that they were able to get Kenneth Walker back as well. Zach Charbonnet has also been in the mix, whether it's been in the running and passing game there. So it just feels like Jay Ascend to me here has taken a little bit of a step back in this offense here. So, and also, again, let's not forget they also have Tyler Lockett, and they also have their tight ends there as well. So I think this might be another week where we don't see a whole lot of Jay Ascend. So I do like the under 47.5 on his receiving yards here, Chris.
Yeah, I mean, shout out. Let's make unders great again. If I love it, I love to hear under. And just I think that the biggest thing to me that sticks out is something that you mentioned. This San Francisco defense has been pretty good against the pass. 6th in passing attempts per game, so they're not, they're keeping the ball out of opposing quarterbacks' hands in general, but also the completion percentage, 62.9%. So they only, which is top 10 passing yards, 197 per game, which is also in the top half of the league. Looks like they're ranked about 12th there. This is a pretty good San Francisco defense. We've seen them take out some quarterbacks, and in the divisional game we expect to be them to be extremely locked in, not just because of the divisional game, but also because they're coming off that loss against Arizona, where they probably got a bad taste in their mouth. A lot of my readings have kind of stood on the point that most of the time these Thursday night football games are a burden on teams. If they don't like to play on Sunday and then have to play again immediately on Thursday, they do not like that. They think about that as not having enough time to prepare. Not from San Francisco this week. San Francisco is saying, you know what? We're happy we play again on Thursday. We can get that bad taste out of our mouth a little early. So yeah, I'm pretty sure this defense is going to be fired up in the divisional game, especially coming off the double-digit, lead that they ended up losing. So yeah, I think they're locked into the game plan here. If I like the under a lot.
Yeah, and also, having a healthy kicker there as well for the 49ers will definitely help them in this situation here as well. All right, Chris, before we do get over to honorable mentions here, let me tell everyone about the newest sponsor here on the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. That is going to be BetUS. We're brought to you by BetUS. Bet with the best in the business, BetUS. BetUS has been around for more than 30 years. Easily deposit using cryptocurrency and get lightning fast payouts. U.S. players are always welcome. Sign up and deposit $100, and you have a chance to win a 1964 Mustang. Use our link to sign up and get a 125% deposit bonus on your first 3 deposits. All you got to do is go to sportsgamblingpodcast.com/betus. That's sportsgamblingpodcast.com/betus. Make sure you use that promo code SGPN so they know that we sent you. BetUS, America's favorite sportsbook. And we're also brought to you by Rhythm. SGPN's proud partner, Rhythm, is the #1 AI-powered back sports betting platform that helps provide bettors of all levels the ability to build custom predictive betting models in seconds and get predictions for betting on money lines, spreads, totals, and props. Build your own model, copy one of the top-performing models from the leaderboard, or press Build a Model for Me, and Rhythm gives you predictions for every game and player prop, and also has a myriad of stats, research, and trend analysis to give you even more betting insights. For this game, the Rhythm predictive model does like the San Francisco 49ers minus the 3.5, and their favorite prop, or their top-rated model for this game, Brock Purdy, over 12.5 rushing yards in this game. Rhythm is predicting that he has 18 rushing yards in this game here. So claim your 7-day free trial today by going to sportsgamblingpodcast.com/rhythm. That's sportsgamblingpodcast.com/RITHMM. All right, Chris, let's get into honorable mentions here for this game. Anything that you were looking at that you couldn't quite get to the window with just quite yet?
I think looking at DK, I kind of want to put a bet in on DK just because it's always fun to watch the game with a bet on DK when you get a standalone game. Such a big, strong, physical receiver that has that breakaway speed. So I contemplated, looking at his receptions to go over. That number is 4.5. I talked about, I think it correlates well with your under for Njigba. I think that's the first thing that stands out. But then I think one of the things that helped me up just a tad bit was I look at Seattle's time of possession here, and I don't know if a lot of people are looking into this or use it to handicap, but the Seattle offense is not on the field often. They're actually on the field just 47.7% of the time, which is 25th in the NFL. So their offense has spending a lot of time on the bench, while the defense, that struggled to get off the field at times, has been on the field, right? And then you take a look at San Francisco, from the opposite side, time of possession for defense, they're actually #1. They're on the field. This San Francisco defense is on the field less than any other defense in the NFL. So those things kind of held me up to take the over 4.5. But if I think that, Seattle's going to be playing from behind, then I do want to find a way to, play it. Maybe it's not the 4.5 receptions for DK, but that was really the only one that stood out to me a little bit more than all of the rest. What about yourself?
Yeah, I liked. I mentioned Gino that I did like 2 props for him. I do like him to throw an interception in this game. The VIG has come down on this. I think it opened around -150, -160. I'd see it down to around -130, -135 for Geno Smith in this game. And again, a lot of it has to do with, like we mentioned, that if we feel like that, Geno's going to be throwing, or the Seahawks, I should say, are going to be behind in this game. I think that's just going to equate to obviously more pass attempts and obviously the opportunity as well for him to possibly throw an interception here. And took a look at quarterbacks against the 49ers this season. The 49ers defense, I should say, has intercepted the opposing quarterback in 4 out of the 5 games this season. So they got one off of Darnold, they got one off of Aaron Rodgers, weren't able to intercept Matthew Stafford, but then they got Jacoby Brissett. And then last week they were able to get Kyler Murray there as well. So we know how good this defense can be. I know they are dealing with some injuries in the back half for the San Francisco 49ers. But again, also Geno Smith has been a quarterback that we know that can also throw interceptions. He had one against the Broncos, two against the Miami Dolphins, one against the Lions. Didn't throw one last week, so it seems like he may just be here in this spot, possibly against the San Francisco 49ers to throw one. Last season for Geno Smith, in 2 games last season, I'm sorry. He threw one back on November 23rd, and then going back to 2022 season, he had one in that game there as well. So I think there might be an opportunity here for Geno Smith to throw an interception here, Chris. But those were the ones I was looking at. Outside of that, I think that was pretty much it. Nothing else really stood out to me for this game. Yeah, so I'll leave it at that. Any thoughts on that Geno interception?
Yeah, I think you mentioned it at the top. If it's first thing that came to my mind when I heard you say it, them potentially playing from behind, and then you got the numbers to back it up. That like we talked about, we think Seattle's going to be super. We think San Francisco's going to be super locked in defensively, and they are playing from behind. A team that passes the ball the most times in the NFL, are always going to be prone to making a few more mistakes. And I gave out the number earlier, but 39.8 times per game is how many times this Seattle's offense is passing the ball per contest right now. By far, number one in the NFL. And yeah, I'm going to make a few more mistakes if I'm passing the ball 40 times per game. So this could be a tip pass. This could be, anything. And I like that the vig is coming down on it as well. So it makes sense to me. I like the look on Mr. Smith to throw one to the opposite team.
I had one more that I was waiting for this line to come out, and I'm glad I went back and checked the odds here. We talked about the running back position with obviously Jordan Mason, but if you take a look at running backs against the Seahawks, at least through the air, I think there might be something to it where they are giving up 31 receiving yards per game. Are the Seahawks? Jordan Mason hasn't really been involved in the passing game, but I think this could be a Kyle Juszczyk game out of the backfield, catching the football. And I know Kyle Juszczyk hasn't also really been involved as far as in the offense. I mean, I know he's more out there for blocking and that sort. But I think that there may be an opportunity here for Kyle Juszczyk. The number right now is sitting at 7.5 for him. And I mean, this could be a sneaky play here for Kyle Juszczyk. I'm just trying to pull up his numbers here for the season. And I know that he hasn't had any rush attempts this season, but I'm trying to pull up the numbers here as far as scrimmage yards do go here. So, Chris, week 1 against the Jets, 2 receptions on 3 targets for 40 yards. Against the Vikings, he had 3 receptions, 19 yards. He had 1 for 6 yards against the Rams, and then he had 1 for 12 against the New England Patriots. Didn't have anything last week against the Arizona Cardinals, so this could be a prop where he could possibly get this in one catch here. So I'll probably put like a half a unit on this one because, again, the books are also anticipating that if he does have a reception, it's going to be a long one because his receiving yards is slated at 7.5 and his longest receptions at 7.5 as well. So yeah, they got a little sneaky with that one. But if you are, one of those lateral players, I like those milestone bets. I think this could be a Kyle Juszczyk receiving yards type of game here. We're not asking him for a whole heck of a lot here. It is at 7.5, like I mentioned. And let me see if they do have a ladder opportunity for him. So for him to get, it starts at 25 plus, but it's at plus 370. So if your book offers a 15 plus, 20 plus, in that range, and if you want to get this up to 25 or more receiving yards for Kyle Juszczyk, I think there's an opportunity. He did it back in week 1, but we've seen crazier thing happen. So I wanted to mention that one, Chris, on Kyle Juszczyk.
Yeah, you always find these sneaky running back props, and most of the time they cash. I'm not going to jinx you, and I'm going to knock on wood. And, this one also makes a ton of sense. You just need one of those, third and manageable situations where, Jordan Mason is on the bench and we get a slight dump off here. He turns it upfield and maybe it's a will route or, he makes one guy miss. Or, Juszczyk is a big guy. Maybe he runs through somebody and he could a 10-yard, catches is just to move the chains him is enough. So I like that one. Definitely think it's sneaky. And you mentioned the books, also trying to find a way to pull back the curtain just a tad bit and make sure that you're not going to profit too much off of it by putting those numbers where they did in the market.
All right, so that is honorable mentions here. Let's get to our touchdown scores in this game here. Chris, who do you like to find the end zone?
So I'd be remiss without mentioning George Kittle. I think just how I like him to to get the receiving yards. I could see just close my eyes and envision him in the back of the end zone, spiking the football because he scored against this team, and that's something that he's done a couple times in his career. I also think, and I haven't mentioned this guy's name, I also think Debo gets in. Okay. So you get George Kittle at 175 plus 175. I like the odds there over on BetMGM, best number that I could find. And Debo plus 125. I just feel like he'll be utilized a lot. Within Seattle's weaknesses, I feel like Debo's strengths actually show a lot here. With his ability to be able to rush the football, catch quick screen passes. They're just going to utilize him in the offense. I think we'll see that in this game. And Debo is also someone who's had a double touchdown game against this same Seattle defense. So I'm thinking, after a big week from Brandon Ayuk last week, we probably see a little bit more Debo Samuel. It's always a little difficult, to, in my opinion anyway, to figure out who's going to score because Seattle has so many offensive weapons. But if I probably split it and go Debo and Kittle both, half unit on both. Didn't quite get there on Seattle, but I think I gave out Metcalf, and every time I give him out, he scores. So, why not just go right back to him? He's a physical specimen. So I'll just go Kittle and Debo here, just because the running backs are, I think I saw minus 170 for Jordan Mason. Like, it's not a lot of value there, but I think, Kittle and Samuel, especially with both of them being north of plus 120, I think are pretty good looks here based on the value. What about yourself?
Yeah, 100% agree about George Kittle. 3 of the last 4 career games against the Seahawks, he's found the end zone, including 2 games where he had 2 touchdowns each in those games against the Seahawks. And like I mentioned, he scored a touchdown in 3 straight games that he has played in for this 49ers team. Like I mentioned, he didn't play in that week 3 matchup for the 49ers, but he had a touchdown last week against Arizona. He got one against the Patriots, and he got one against the Vikings there as well. So 100% co-sign that one with you. If you don't like Jordan Mason, I'm going to get a little dicey this week. Let's go with Kyle Juszczyk to find the end zone here. Maybe it's in the red zone that he gets a little screen pass here and runs it into the end zone. I think that there's a possibility for that. That number for Kyle Juszczyk is sitting at 7-1. I think that's a pretty good look. Again, maybe you can find some better odds on that. Like we always say, definitely shop around for the best number. Well, Geno Smith, I mentioned his rushing yards, right? And I think that if they do get down to the end zone, he's not able to find any of his receivers. That number's at plus 550 for him for anytime touchdown scores. So, we'll take some longer shots this week. We'll go Geno Smith plus 550. We'll go Kyle Juszczyk 7-1. Love the call on George Kittle plus 175. Yeah, I'll leave it at that. We really don't like getting into the ones that are, minus prices. I see a minus 195, minus 200 for Jordan Mason. And again, rightfully so for him to have 2 touchdowns at plus 285 there as well. But would it be surprised if he does have a touchdown in this game? Absolutely not. But
gross, gross odds.
Yeah. That one's always anytime I see a minus price on an anytime touchdown score, I usually shy away from it. All right. All right, so those are our touchdown scores here. Chris, let's wrap it up here, and let's get into our best bets for the Thursday night football game, week 6, between the Niners and the Seahawks. Where are you taking us?
We'll go back to the running back position here. We'll go Jordan Mason up and over to 80.5 rushing yards. Thinking that it's a game, like you mentioned, 3 to 4 so far. He's gone up and over 100 yards rushing. And this is a Seattle defense on a short week that gave up, 129 last week to Tyrone Tracy Jr. If you know who that is. So we'll go there. Giving up 128 on the season, even if they play a little bit better. I think Jordan Mason will, like I said, just protect the football a little bit better this week. Don't want to lose 2 fumbles in back-to-back weeks. So I think 4.5 yards per pop. We get some good Jordan Mason here. I love your play on his long of over 17.5 rushing yards. But we'll go Jordan Mason up and over 80.5 rushing yards here.
Love it. All right, for my best bet, I will go with Geno's. Let's go with his rushing yards. I think this number is moving in the right direction. It opened at 12.5. There are 13.5s definitely still out there. At Bet365, at Bet Rivers, at BetMGM. We have FanDuel and Caesars up at 14.5, but I think there's widely available 13.5s. But I think this is a game where you can get into 20 plus here for this Seahawks offense. And we talked about the pressure that that the Niners defensive line should generate on Geno Smith, maybe forcing him out of the pocket, utilizing his legs. Like I mentioned, that he's done this in 3 out of the 5 weeks for the Seattle Seahawks, and he's done it in back-to-back weeks as well. And again, this could also all come on one play here for Geno Smith. I'd be curious to see what his longest rush attempt in this game is going to be. But I think, again, if that opportunity presents itself, I do think that he's going to take off. So if we're able to get 3 to 4 carries here from Geno Smith, I think that he can get up and over this number. And again, right now, the longest rush attempt that they have for Geno Smith is set at 9.5, and where the market pretty much has him around 13.5 to 15.5. So I'll call that 13.5 because they are widely available here for Geno Smith. So give me Geno Smith over 13.5 rushing yards in this game against the San Francisco 49ers. All right, that's going to wrap it up here for this edition of the Propcast. NFL Week 6 Thursday Night Football, Niners and Seahawks. Should be a great NFC West battle here. Teams, again, it's going to be a lot of fun just watching this division in totality, just because I feel like there's a lot more parity, not only in this division, but honestly across the entire National Football League. And I mean, just quickly, just looking at the standings right now for this division before we wrap it up here, it's getting tight, right? Because we see the Seahawks at 3-2, we have the Niners at 2-3, we have the Arizona Cardinals at 2-3, the Rams, who will be getting some reinforcements back, hopefully Cooper Kupp after this upcoming week on their bye week, they're at 1-4. And again, when you're only 2 games behind at this juncture of the season, you still have that confidence as well. So should be a fun division here, Chris. But anything else you want to mention before we get out of here?
No, I think you did a really good job of summing it up. I'm super excited as well. And like you said, it's a lot of parity, in my opinion. So I definitely agree with that also. Should be a good divisional matchup here, man. Like I said, I do kind of lean towards Seattle to bounce back in this spot against the Seattle, team that I feel like, still really hasn't been tested. And when they did, Detroit kind of, laid them out. So we'll see how it plays out. But best of luck on all of your open tickets. If you're watching this, make sure you guys are leaving us a review. We always say 5-star, 5-star. Hitting the like button if you're watching on YouTube, and we'll catch you guys next time. Best of luck on all your action.
I'll leave it at this. There is one team in the NFC East that has a plus point differential, and that is your division leaders, Washington Commanders, sitting at 4-1, led by Jaden Daniels, who is now down to 10-1 for those MVP odds. So, hey, don't look now, but things look very, very bright for the Washington Commanders after all they've suffered over the past several seasons. So we'll keep an eye out on that
decades.
For sure. We'll put at decades as well. And then I'll leave it at this. My division, all 4 teams have a negative point differential for the AFC South, led by the Jacksonville Jaguars -46, Texans right now -12, Indy only -3 in point differential. They have a 2-3 record. So we'll be keeping an eye on our teams. But hey, my team and Chris's team combined 8-2, 4-1 each, leading at the division. Let's get it. All right, we'll talk to you guys on Friday for the Week 6 Sunday game player props. They're definitely looking forward to that. Usually around the same time. I had some work to do this morning. That's why we were about 30 minutes late if you were watching live. So that's on me. But we typically try to go around 12:30 Eastern time when we do record these pods for our player props here. So we'll be back at the same time on Friday. So look out for us then. Till then, enjoy the Thursday night football game. We'll recap it on Friday. Hopefully talk about some winning tickets. Make sure you guys follow Chris over on the Twitter machine at ChrisBeCappinn with 2 P's and 2 N's. You can follow me there as well at SportsNerd824. Also, please do us a favor, leave us that rating and review, and subscribe to the Propcast on YouTube if you do want to watch us live as well. All right, we'll talk to you guys on Friday. Good luck with your bets. Let's break these books off. And always remember to let it ride.